Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be kind of diving into this question that I think a lot of you have probably thought about at one point or another in your dating lives.
Yeah.
Do men actually like it when women make the first move?
Oh, absolutely. This is a question that I think has sparked many debates, late night conversations, fueled all sorts of speculation.
To really get to the bottom of this, we're
Yeah.
turning to, as always, the ultimate source of truth in the modern age, Reddit.
Of course.
A Reddit thread on AskMenAdvice, specifically, where this woman, she's seeking some advice on whether or not she should text this guy
Okay.
that she met at work.
Interesting.
He seemed interested, but he hasn't reached out to her yet.
Okay.
And what makes this thread so fascinating is just the sheer volume of responses that this woman got.
Wow.
Over 170 comments, primarily from men, all ready and willing to share their opinions on this age-old question.
All right, well, let's just get right to it. What is the general consensus then from these Reddit Romeos?
So it seems like the overwhelming majority of men in this thread are like, please make the first move, we love it.
Really? Like, no hesitation.
Yeah, like they express a very strong preference for women taking the initiative.
I have to admit, that's a little surprising.
I know, right? You would think, like, considering traditional dating norms and all that.
Right, exactly.
But I think when you kind of dig a little deeper into the why, it reveals some really interesting kind of shifts in the dating landscape.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. Why are these men so into women making the first move?
Okay, so a lot of the men in the thread talk about this growing fear of rejection,
Okay.
but even more so a fear of, like, misinterpreting signals
Uh-huh.
and being labeled as, like, creepy or
It's
disrespectful.
really sad that men feel like they have to walk on eggshells like that.
I know. I feel like, in the current social climate, this kind of heightened awareness of consent and boundaries,
Yeah.
it's almost like men are more hesitant, cautious about approaching women.
Absolutely, and I think it goes beyond that too, right? It's not
Mhm.
just about, like, avoiding a negative consequence.
Right.
I think these men genuinely want to be respectful,
Yeah.
and they don't want to make women uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like this weird disconnect between traditional expectations of, like, men being the pursuers,
Yeah.
but also, like, this new reality where men are kind of being told to be more cautious and aware.
Absolutely. And it creates this really interesting space where women making the first move is almost like a relief for men
Yeah.
because it takes that pressure off of them to be the ones to initiate
Right.
and to kind of navigate this potential minefield of misinterpretation.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you wonder if that whole, like, if he wanted to, he would kind of mantra needs a serious update.
Totally. And I think that statement, while, maybe sometimes true,
Yeah.
it can be so incredibly limiting.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't take into account, like, the complexities of human interaction, especially in today's dating world.
And we forget that men, just like anyone else, get shy, they get insecure,
Sure.
they're not sure if their feelings are reciprocated.
Right, exactly. And this is where this Reddit thread, I think, offers some really valuable insights because these men are essentially saying, like, please be more direct. Just tell us what you want.
They're tired of the games.
They're tired of trying to, like, decipher all the subtle hints, and they're craving some clear communication.
This is just to summarize, like, cut to the chase, ladies.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so many of them in this thread stress that, like, being upfront and straightforward about your intentions
You love that.
is really the way to go.
Yeah. Honesty and transparency saves so much time and energy, right?
Absolutely, so much.
No more like, is he interested? Is he not? Like, just put it out there.
And there's a certain confidence and self-assuredness that comes, I think, with making the first move
Right.
that can be incredibly attractive.
There's actually this one comment that really stood out to me. This guy wrote, if a woman makes a move, I know she's interested. It takes the pressure off and allows me to relax and be myself.
That's so insightful, and I think it really challenges this kind of traditional notion that men always want to be the pursuers,
Right.
and that taking that initiative away from them somehow, like, diminishes their masculinity or something.
It seems like for a lot of these guys, it's quite the opposite.
Completely.
Like, knowing that a woman is interested actually allows them to be more authentic and vulnerable, which I think is so beautiful.
Exactly. And that vulnerability can be the foundation for, a much deeper and more genuine connection. It really does seem like, this idea of women kind of taking charge in the dating scene is resonating with a lot of guys out there.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it's like challenging those old school dating scripts we've all, like, come to accept as like the norm.
Yeah, and this Reddit thread, it actually offers some really interesting stories that kind of back up this whole shift in the dating landscape.
Okay, like,
There's this one story about this woman who she really took the whole direct approach to a whole other level.
okay, how so?
So she met this guy and she took his phone and she put her number in it.
What?
And then she immediately texted herself from his phone.
Okay, that is bold. That is a bold move.
Talk about taking initiative, right?
Yeah, but I mean, did it work?
It did. They ended up dating for 5 years.
Wow. See, it pays to be bold sometimes,
Right?
but I can also see like some women might feel like hesitant to be that direct.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
worried about coming across as too aggressive or too forward or something.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's a totally valid concern, right? Because it's important to remember that men, like women, are not all the same.
Right.
So what one guy might find attractive, another guy might be completely turned off by it.
So it's not just as simple as saying like all men love it when women make the first move.
No, not at all. And you still have to kind of read the situation, understand, who you're dealing with as an individual.
So like gauging the situation is still important.
Absolutely.
So how do you navigate that? Like, how do you know?
Well, I mean, one thing that comes up a lot in this thread is the importance of clear communication. Like, really emphasize that being direct is key.
Okay.
And they say, like, avoid those subtle hints because, a lot of them admitted, like, we miss those. They go right over our heads.
So basically what you're saying is just be upfront.
Just be upfront.
Just be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's like, there's a certain respect that comes with that too.
Yeah.
Like, I respect you enough to just be honest with you and not waste your time.
Yeah, it's refreshing, right? Like,
Okay.
no more game playing, just like honesty and transparency. That's what we want.
I think it's kind of a reflection of like a bigger shift in our society, right?
Yeah.
Towards valuing honesty and transparency in all of our relationships, not just romantic ones.
So we've established that men generally appreciate it when you're direct with them. But like, what about the how? Like, how do you make that first move? Like, do these Reddit guys have any like practical tips on like how to do it effectively?
Yeah, actually, they offer a bunch of suggestions, and one that came up a lot was to start with a simple conversation starter,
Oh,
like something related to a shared interest or something that you talked about before, maybe when you first met.
so instead of just blurting out, "Hey, I like you" or something,
Yeah.
just find kind of like a natural way to spark up a conversation.
Right. And another tip is to suggest a casual hangout rather than like a formal date.
Right.
So it kind of takes the pressure off.
It takes the pressure off. It's more like low key. And then if it doesn't work out like romantically, it's not like you've just wasted an entire evening on a date that's like not going anywhere.
Exactly. And, maybe you just made a new friend, expand your social circle a little bit.
There was also this one comment about like making sure that like, when you are making the first move, that the guy understands that that's what you're doing.
Oh, okay.
Like that your intentions are clear.
Right.
Because, some guys, they might need a little extra reassurance that you are, flirting with them or that you're interested in them romantically.
I think that's a good reminder that like clear communication, it's a two-way street, right?
Right.
It's not just about women being direct. It's also about men being receptive and responsive to those signals.
And speaking of signals, there was this really interesting observation that came up in the thread about how men are increasingly like hesitant to approach women in the current social climate.
Yeah, I think that was kind of like a theme throughout the thread. Like a lot of guys were saying that, they've been told to be more cautious, to not come on too strong,
Right.
to be really aware of, potential repercussions.
It's like we're sending mixed messages, right? Like on one hand, we're telling men, like, don't approach women.
Right.
And then on the other hand, we're telling women, like, well, wait for the man to pursue you.
It's like a double standard.
It's like this weird, confusing double standard.
Totally.
And it's no wonder that, a lot of guys are just kind of like, well, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah, and I think it really underscores the need for us to have like a more open and honest conversation about like what healthy and respectful interaction actually looks like in today's world. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Because I think we need to kind of break down these sort of outdated norms, right?
Right.
And create a space where both men and women feel comfortable expressing their interest without feeling like there's going to be
Without fear.
without fear of some sort of like negative consequence.
So it's like finding that balance between like respecting boundaries, but also encouraging authentic connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it seems like A lot of men are kind of welcoming the shift towards, a more balanced dynamic in dating.
It's a whole new world out there in the dating scene, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, it's exciting, but I think it can be a little bit confusing and overwhelming at the same time for people.
It really challenges all those old beliefs we have about,
Hmm.
how dating is supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think what's so cool about this thread is it gives us this kind of inside look into how men's perspectives on dating are changing too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. We've been talking about this whole, like, if he wanted to, he would kind of thing.
Right.
And this thread really debunks that myth, doesn't it?
It totally does. Because
Like,
like that saying, it assumes that like men are just these like, confident beings that are always clear about what they want.
right.
And that's just not the reality.
It's so oversimplified.
Yeah.
I mean, men experience insecurities, anxieties, all of those things just like anyone else.
And I think it's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking like, well, if he doesn't make a move, he must not be interested.
Right.
But these guys are saying like, no, 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 that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, a lot of times that hesitation comes from, fear of misreading the signals, fear of rejection.
Right. Or like even worse, being perceived as like disrespectful or creepy.
Right, exactly.
It's almost like they're damned if they do, damned if they
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in for sure.
Yeah. And this fear, it's not totally unfounded, right?
Yeah.
Because like they brought up in the thread like this valid concern about false accusations or like negative social repercussions for, making an advance that's not welcome.
Yeah, and it's a complex issue. It really is. And it kind of highlights this need for us to be having these conversations about, what does a dating culture look like where there's mutual respect and open communication?
Right. So it's like, yes, we want to encourage women to take initiative,
Yes.
but we also want to create a space where men feel safe
Absolutely.
to express their interest as well.
Without feeling judged or, that there's going to be some sort of reprisal.
So it's like finding that sweet spot where both men and women feel empowered
Right.
to kind of, initiate and express their feelings in a way that feels good for both people.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to put it.
And this kind of brings up a really interesting question for our listeners. What does like healthy and respectful initiation look like in, today's world for both men and women?
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about, as we're all kind of navigating this, this new world of dating.
It's a journey.
It is a journey for sure, and there's no easy answer, right? But maybe it starts with recognizing that we're all human.
Yeah.
We all have these feelings and that, maybe we need to challenge some of those old ideas we have about how things are supposed to be.
Exactly. It's like letting go of those rigid gender roles and just like allowing, space for connection to happen organically.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like those connections that you least expect that turn out to be the most incredible relationships.
Absolutely. So to kind of wrap up our deep dive today, what key takeaways can we kind of, leave our listeners with?
I think the overall message here is that it's generally okay for women to make the first move.
Yeah.
A lot of men are, open to it. They're even relieved when women take the initiative.
But we have to remember that everyone is different.
Right, of course.
So just be mindful of who you're interacting with, what the situation is.
Yeah. And like we've been saying, clear communication is so important.
Yeah.
Just be upfront, express your interests, but also, be prepared that, you might not always get the response that you want.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. It's just part of the process.
Yeah, rejection doesn't mean that you're not worthy or, that something's wrong with you.
Right, exactly. It just means that, that particular connection wasn't meant to be.
And who knows, that failed connection, as we call it, might lead you to something even better.
Totally.
So just, go out there, be bold. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Embrace the unknown.
Right. You never know what amazing connections you might make.
That's the beauty of it all, right? This whole journey of, putting yourself out there, exploring, discovering, learning, growing.
Beautifully said, as always. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.